figure out how to do the transitions. Hello, everybody. They can see it.
Hi. So there's a what?
But there's a way, so to do this stream for y'all every week, we're going to get started in a second. But to do the stream every week, we use Restream and Open Broadcast Studio Restream, so it can go to YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, a number of places. And then OBS to make it fancy, like that's what the logo is, that's what the overlay is. And OBS like allows you to do like transitions, like animated transitions between scenes that make it really fancy. But I don't know how to do that. So I'll just like click between them.
You know, that seems like a lot of work when we're all typically participating in capitalism on the Thursday morning.
Yeah.
So it's kind of okay if it's not, razzle dazzle. It's all right.
One day we'll have the razzle dazzle. That's my goal, is to keep leveling up this stream until such point as it's mad fancy. Until we look like CNN in this bitch. Excuse me. In this place.
Hello, good morning, content warning. You should definitely have earbuds. This is not a safe for work environment.
This is the two pottiest mouths in New Mexico chapter. So, but greetings all. Thank you for joining us. We're going to get started in just a minute. We're just letting folks trickle in, because time is a colonial construct. Yep. So, I've heard people say that. I don't know what it means.
It's like, I'm a filter. I'm going to be good. I'm a filter. No, I cuss. I swear.
It's good. We were talking about it at Work City actually yesterday? Tuesday. About swearing and not. And that's what I said. I said it's like seasoning. I said it's like a way to add some flair to a conversation.
Sometimes you gotta spice it up or you really need to emphasize.
That's what I'm saying.
You just must. So, yeah, no. We swear, so you should be careful. You've been warned.
And this is the swearing subject that we're going to talk about today, so it calls for it.
And I really tried to make it long-winded, but no. I can't. Sometimes fuck shit's just fuck shit, and it's real simple.
That's what I appreciate about you. You just make it plain. We don't need the big words. We don't need the SAT words. We don't need, the abstract phrasing. We just need to be straight up about what's happening.
Because it's bullshit. We'll make it quick for you.
Yes. All right, you want to get started? 11:05?
Let's do it.
Woo!
Good morning. We're the All African People's Revolutionary Party, and we're also members of the All African Women's Revolutionary Union. I'm Demetria.
I'm Oni, or Onya Samu.
Hello, good morning. We would like to acknowledge that, number one, we are still in Tiwa territory, and we stand in complete solidarity with our indigenous comrades because this shit belongs to them. And land back initiatives are real. So there's that. We also need to call in an ancestor to come into this space and just be with us. And since October 6th was Fannie Lou Hamer's birthday, we are calling in Fannie Lou Hamer. She was an amazing revolutionary activist. I had to get grown to learn about her, and I'm so glad I did. And one of the quotes that I was going to share from her, I couldn't find, but it was about, being fat. And if you are fat, it's not because you're well-fed, it's because the food you have access to is trash. And that's what it does to you. But then I found this one that said, we did not come all this way for no 2 seats when all of us is tired. So, yes, we're calling in Fannie Lou Hamer into this space for the conversation we are going to have today.
And the conversation we're going to be having today is going to be about what the heck the U.S. military is doing in Africa. And I bet that a not insignificant portion of people listening to us right now had no idea that the U.S. military is in Africa. So the political education portion of the show today is, what is AFRICOM? Why is the U.S. in Africa? What is the point? What are the consequences? And what can we do about it? And so this is going to be the political education section of the show. If you watched the show before, every single episode We have a political education segment. You're not ever going to go to an all African People's Revolutionary Party event and not get political education. It's the core of what we do. We do it internally with work study. We do it externally with programs like this, because the whole point is that we live in a society that lies constantly about all kinds of things. Kwame Ture said capitalism doesn't lie some of the time. Capitalism lies all the time, which means that we are constantly inundated with lies about us, lies about Africa, lies about how the system works and why. And so the purpose of political education is to cut through the lies, to inject some truth into this den of lies, and also to develop your critical thinking skills so that when you watch the news, you can start to parse out what is straight up BS, what is being misrepresented, what the actual truth of the situation is. It's going to inspire you to ask questions that are going to lead you to truths on your own. So that's why we do it. You can't organize a sleeping people. You got to wake them up first, and then you get some action. That's what Malcolm X said. That's the purpose. So what is the U.S. military doing in Africa? The U.S. military is in Africa as part of a military project known as AFRICOM. What is AFRICOM? It stands for the U.S. military's Africa Command. AFRICOM, right now, as we speak, is represented in 46 separate U.S. military bases on the African continent. That's right, 46 U.S. military bases are in Africa right now. In addition to those 46 U.S. military bases, there are hundreds of thousands of active duty troops from the U.S. military currently deployed to Africa. I bet you had no idea, because they don't talk about that shit on the news at all. But there are hundreds of thousands of active duty U.S. troops deployed to Africa right now in those 46 U.S. military bases. In addition to that, there are drones that complete so-called counterterrorism missions, straight up bombings in places like Somalia, in Tanzania, in Kenya, in the Sudan, and they're looking to expand that drone warfare. And if you know anything about how drones operate in places like, say, Afghanistan, or in Iran, or rather Iraq, where they murdered that guy, Soleimani, then you know that a drone bombing is not as targeted as they sell it. A drone bombing is essentially a missile being deployed from the push of a button from the sky, and there is always a wide amount of collateral damage. They might be going for like one guy, but they usually get like a whole market, or a whole wedding, or a church. And then what the U.S. military does is they say all of the additional people that were killed, besides the one guy we were trying to get, those are all terrorists. And they say that without like going on the ground, actually seeing who died, or like talking to anybody, or investigating at all. They're just like, because they died, they are terrorists, and they mark it down like we killed 8 terrorists when they were trying to kill one guy. So that's happening all over Africa right now as we speak, with very, very little reporting outside of left media sources about what's happening. In addition to the 46 military bases, in addition to the drone warfare, there are also hundreds of special forces engaged in all kinds of subterfuge and fuck shit to coordinate access to African resources, to undermine social justice movements on the continent, to threaten governments that don't act in the way the United States wants. Like, all of this is happening at the same time under the umbrella of AFRICOM. AFRICOM's command center, like, it's run from a base in Germany remotely, because they knew when they were expanding AFRICOM as a military project that if they put the headquarters in Africa, African people would burn that shit down, because African people understand very clearly the consequences of foreign military presence on their land. So let's talk about why AFRICOM is there, what it is they say they're doing versus what they're actually doing. And for that, I'm going to pass it back to Demetria.
So AFRICOM's stated intent, and this is, I'm going to read what the military says they are doing. No, not what they are doing. What they said they wanted to do. AFRICOM is intended to enhance U.S. security relationships with African governments, their militaries, and related regional organizations to expand their capabilities to address regional instability, crisis, and concerns. Let's talk about why that's bullshit. Mm-hmm. It's bullshit because all of the things they want to address is what the U.S. is bringing. Mm-hmm. That's the reality. That's what's actually happening. The U.S. has no interest in strengthening the African government. because the African government does not need, there's not a country in Africa who needs the United States to strengthen their government. There's not a country in Africa who needs the United States to help calm instability. That's not what's needed or required from the United States of America. As we know, the U.S. just likes to go be in everybody's goddamn business. Yep. The U.S. has no chill in any way, shape, form, or fashion. It doesn't. The United States of America would invade the United States of America for its treatment of human beings. That is an indisputable fact. Okay? So what is really happening is global domination through imperialism and solar colonialism. With them, there are 800 to 1,000 military bases across the world. U.S. military bases across the world. The United States is a very small piece of the globe. What? No. So the reality is the United States invaded Africa to steal their shit.
Our shit. And other thing I forgot to mention about AFRICOM is that it began as a U.S. military project during the second Bush administration, the W administration. It was initiated in the last year of George W. Bush's last term, October 2007. And then, under U.S. President Barack Obama, the first African president of the United States, the U.S. military footprint in Africa was drastically expanded. The size of AFRICOM as it is today happened under the Obama administration with Vice President Joe Biden. So, for a variety of reasons, AFRICOM would not be possible to the extent that it is today if it had not happened under Barack Obama. And what I mean by that is that if George W. Bush had said, we want to open 46 U.S. military bases in Africa, there wouldn't have been, maybe like, I don't know, Herman Cain would have been cool with it. But like the majority of African people in the United States would have been like, what? No. Like there would have been an uproar. But what Barack Obama did as president of the United States, as the first African president, was put a brown face, was put one of our faces over the U.S. empire and make that empire palatable, not just to Africans in the United States, but to Africans around the world. When Barack Obama came to power, anti-imperialist movements, even like in places like Cuba, even in places throughout Africa, were like, well, shit, maybe it's going to be different now. This is one of us. How could this man possibly not understand colonialism? And that was like the specific purpose why Barack Obama was elevated in that particular way. It had to be him. It had to be the first African U.S. president that would allow the U.S. empire to make such a massive footprint on the African continent without any kind of pushback from African people in the United States or throughout the world at first. And even to this day, African people in the United States have very little awareness of what the U.S. military is doing in Africa. The U.S. military is responsible for the death of hundreds of people from those drone bombings they just call terrorists. The U.S. military is responsible for killing African people in Kenya, in Niger, in Tanzania, and no one is speaking on it. The same government that is brutalizing our people, the same government that is responsible for the deaths of people like George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and Michael Brown as we speak, carrying out the very same kind of violence in Africa for the same reasons. To uphold the global system of white supremacy, to exploit African people and our labor, and also to steal land and resources just like they do here from indigenous people. So it's really, really, really important for us, particularly in this moment of like resurgence of the Black Lives Matter movement, where people are taking to the streets, demanding an end to police terrorism, demanding an end to state violence against African people. We must begin to make the connections between what's happening to us here on stolen land and what's happening to us at home in Africa, and what's happening to us in Haiti, and what's happening to us in Honduras, and what's happening to us throughout the world, because it's the same people doing the same shit to us. It's the same people for the same reasons.
Yep. It's when you learn all skin folk ain't kinfolk. And y'all's forever president truly fucked over the continent of Africa.
Sure did, and us. and us.
Yes.
And we still haven't recovered. And I feel like Kamala Harris is like the second coming. It's the second coming. It's the second coming. You can already tell. You can already tell because that woman built a career. Like, you cannot be a prosecutor in a settler state in the U.S. empire without fucking over African people, without fucking over indigenous people, without fucking over colonized people, period. Like, you just can't. You just can't. Like, that's the job. Yep. And not only are people just accepting that, but they're, like, cloaking her like she was in that. I didn't watch the debate. I was doing a better thing. I was on a panel with a bunch of other African women talking about anti-imperialism. It was amazing. So I didn't watch it, but I saw the highlights. And it was amazing to me that people are, like, like shielding her in, like, a cloak of protection and being like, you know, you're attacking her because she's an African woman. And I'm like, meanwhile, this lady built her entire public persona on a pile of African corpses, on a pile of incarcerated Africans. Like, I'm just like, so, like, they don't matter? Like, we don't have to worry about protecting them? We have to, like, cover for the person responsible? Like, it's on the smaller scale, precisely what Obama did to us, not just with AFRICOM, but also with the 1033 program where he gave billions of dollars in surplus military equipment to police agencies throughout the United States that then turned around and used those weapons against African people rising up against police terrorism.
Yep. It's a glorious clusterfuck. There's, yep. Mm-hmm.
I agree.
Mm-hmm.
So we talked about what AFRICOM is. We talked about who did it. The double team, neoliberal double team of George W. Bush and Barack Obama with Vice President. I'm just going to keep saying Vice President Joe Biden. Vice President Joe Biden. Vice President Joe Biden. Because people keep telling me this man's the lesser evil. And I'm like, which one on the ballot is not going to continue the U.S. military invasion of Africa? Which is the one I vote for that's not for that? And there isn't. There isn't. Well, the Green Party, Howie Hawkins and Angela Walker. But it's in terms of like Biden and Donald Trump, neither of them. They are both in lockstep agreement when it comes to the exploitation of Africa and the U.S. military presence in Africa. AFRICOM was a bipartisan U.S. government project. There was no dissent, not from the Congressional Black Caucus, not from the first African president, not from Bernie Sanders or any of the so-called progressives in the House or the Senate. When it came time to put U.S. military boots on the ground in the African continent, the Democrats and the Republicans were aligned, and the independents were aligned behind that plan.
There was no problem.
Because they understand.
Yep.
This whole system would not exist without being able to steal landed resources from Africa. The entire foundation of the global system of capitalism is based on stealing from Africa. Without resources and land from Africa, this system does not function. And if you don't believe me, I'll give you an example. There's a mineral called coltan that is very rare, very expensive, very precious. It's found in very, very high quantities in China, and it's found in very, very high quantities in the Congo. What is coltan used for? Well, coltan is one of the minerals required to produce lithium-ion batteries. If you're like a tech person, you immediately recognize the word or the phrase lithium-ion batteries, because lithium-ion batteries are found in virtually every modern electronic device that requires recharging. So like your cell phone. The battery in your cell phone is a lithium-ion battery. The battery in your laptop is a lithium-ion battery. In your Apple Watch, in your Fitbit, in your Prius, if you have one of those, my apologies, like anything that requires a rechargeable battery, a lithium-ion battery has coltan in that battery. And like I just said, coltan is found in high quantities in the Congo, and coltan is found in high quantities in China. China had a whole revolution. China overthrew their particular system of government and replaced it with one that was run by the people collectively. And so that means that on the world stage, when people want to buy things from China, China sets the price. But the Congo has been colonized first by Belgium, by King Leopold, who was like a monster, who was worse than Hitler, but you probably don't know about. Then by Belgium itself. And then when Congo won its independence, and elected Patrice Lumumba and tried to like have its way, like self-determine for themselves, the United States government, working with Belgium, assassinated Patrice Lumumba, put in place a military dictator who allowed them free access to the Congo's resources in perpetuity. And so now, in the modern day, Congo is what they call a failed state. Congo has no functioning government. Congo has a series of armed bands of militias and paramilitary groups that compete with each other for control of resources that are then sold to U.S. corporations to produce the goods that you use on a day-to-day basis. Like Apple, like Google, like Microsoft, like Tesla. All these companies get the rare mineral to produce their batteries from the Congo at much less than that mineral is worth, because Western powers, like the United States, worked deliberately to destabilize the Congo to make sure that the people there could never have collective control over the land and the resources. And that's just one nation in the continent and one example of one resource. There are hundreds of resources like that that are strategic importance to the capitalist system, that are hard to find, and that are found in vast quantities in Africa. That is the reason why Africa is poor. That is the reason why Africa is colonized. That is the reason why African people, no matter where we exist in the world, exist at the bottom of society. It's not because of any part of who we are. It's about what they need from us and what they're stealing from Africa.
Yep.
And that is the only reason AFRICOM exists, to facilitate that theft and to make sure that when African people organize and rise up and try to stop it, that there are going to be U.S. military boots on the ground to violently put down that resistance. That is why AFRICOM is there.
Yep. And that is the impact of AFRICOM. It's no one in the United States government is blind to the fact that if you have your hand on the hold of Africa, you have your hand on the hold of the world. It's all the resources, all the labor that we can go and extract from Africa right now. Let's do that thing. And that's what happened.
Yep, so we have to understand that there is no benevolent purpose behind the U.S. empire being in Africa, that this expansion of the U.S. military footprint in our home happened under our noses and without any kind of organized resistance from us living in the belly of the beast in the United States. And for that reason, like they say, AFRICOM is about fighting terrorism. Like that's the reason the U.S. military gives for like everything it does at this point. Like since 9/11, terrorism is like the magic word that allows you to kill thousands of people or bomb a place or join a place or invade a place. And if you say it's to fight terrorism, then people here will not question it.
Nope.
Not since 9/11. But if the stated purpose of AFRICOM is to fight terrorism in Africa, then why is terrorism in Africa worse today than it was before AFRICOM?
Because the terrorists are there.
Because they're bringing the terrorists. Before AFRICOM existed on the African continent, terrorism was like isolated in like single nations. Like one or two single nations was terrorism a problem in Africa. After AFRICOM expanded on the African continent, now you find terrorist groups, so-called terrorist groups, across the entire continent, moving from nation to nation. By every possible measure, terrorism is worse now in Africa than it was before AFRICOM. So if the whole point of AFRICOM is to fight terrorism, and it's worse now, then why are they still there? Why are they still there? And it's precisely what we just said. It's because Africa is rich. Africa is colonized. African people are constantly resisting colonization. And the United States government wants to make sure that regardless of what happens, they have continued access to the resources required to keep the capitalist system running. Yep. The other component of why the U.S. military is there is global competition with powers like China. Chances are, as we're talking, I guarantee at least one person was like, but what about China? What about China in Africa? And that's valid. Because Africa is not free. That means that we are like these neo-colonial governments are not capable of making deals on behalf of African people that are going to be for the best interests of African people, regardless of who that deal is made with. However, how many Chinese military bases are there in Africa right now? Guess.
Do your Googles.
How many? How many Chinese military bases are there in Africa right now?
I'm doing my Googles. Because I'm saying there aren't any, but...
There's 2. There's 2 Chinese military bases in Africa right now. And there are 46 U.S. military bases and hundreds of thousands of U.S. Army troops, mercenaries, contractors, drones. So when you look at the impact of China in Africa versus the United States in Africa, when you look at the fucking body count, it is very clear who the threat is in that situation. And so the United States was attempting to maneuver to apply military force to dominate the African continent, to push out forces like China, to push out any other non-Western powers that are seeking to make deals with Africa independently. So that is the other motivator. The United States wants to control African land and resources, and the United States wants to make sure that no other nation can have any kind of incursion within Africa. It wants to have sole control, basically, alongside European powers like France. So China has 2 military bases. The United States has 46, and the second highest number of military bases in Africa is actually France, which I bet no one fucking knew. But France has been colonizing and stealing from Africa for centuries. There's an entire section of Africa called like the Francophone African countries that for the longest time were forced to use French currency and also give a portion of their GDP directly to a bank in France, like to have like the national bank in France like hold a portion of their money. It was required. It was required because it was negotiated as part of their independence. So the dominant threat to African liberation and to African land and resources, despite all the rhetoric, is not China. It is the United States. It is France. It is NATO. It is these military projects that are, as we speak, killing and looting and murdering people in the African continent.
That's why multilingual people from the continent, one of their languages is always French, because fucking colonization.
Yes. Correct. So the last thing we want to talk about, so we talked about what AFRICOM is. We talked about, what they say it's there for versus what's actually happened. We talked about the impact this has on African people, especially Africans that are fighting against colonization, fighting against imperialism. And so now I want to talk about what our responsibility is as Africans living inside of the U.S. empire. Like, this is happening with our tax dollars. This is happening in our name. This is happening in the name of, like, fighting security threats to the United States. The United States is, like, the biggest security threat on earth. So the idea that, like, that these, like, tiny-ass groups that are, like, in many cases, like, funded directly by the United States or European powers are, like, an existential threat to this empire is, like, very strange to me. But people accept it.
It's comical. And when you think about, like, especially when it comes up on the news, XYZ military base was attacked in wherever. Well, if your base wasn't over there, it wouldn't have got attacked. Yes. If your people weren't over there, they wouldn't be dead right now. So if you minded your goddamn business, but you can't be the world's bully if you mind your business.
Yeah. Actually, the way that many people found out AFRICOM was even a thing was that I think it was like 3 U.S. military soldiers were killed in Niger by the African people that lived in Niger fighting back and killing their asses. And one of the soldiers was an African from the United States. So they found the first 2 bodies immediately, but they didn't find his body until quite some time later. And when they found it, it had been mutilated by the people. And so that's how a lot of Africans in the United States, a lot of U.S. citizens, period, found out AFRICOM was even a thing, was because of that case in Niger. And even people in Congress were like, wait, what? Why are we in Niger? Because it's like, it's not reported. It's like completely under the radar, even though this is like a massive military project. And the thing that I want to point out, particularly about the African that was killed, is that for the Africans in Africa that are facing the U.S. military presence, if we are there wearing the uniform of the empire that is stealing their land, we deserve what we get. Like, if we roll up to Kenya or to Tanzania or to Niger or to Mozambique and we are wearing a U.S. military uniform and taking their land and wrestling for control of their resources and declaring them terrorists for fighting back, then we deserve any kind of resistance that we're met with. Under that basis, we cannot expect solidarity on the basis of being African. Like, if I'm showing up in a U.S. military uniform on your land and you shoot me, I had that coming. I had
it coming. You told me who you were. I believed you.
It's just, what Barack Obama did was significant damage to the anti-imperialist consciousness of African people in the United States. And he also did significant damage to the international connections between African people in Africa and around the world. Because now what we are seeing happening, like many of those hundreds of thousands of U.S. troops that are currently deployed to Africa are Africans from the United States that were born and raised here, that are putting on a U.S. military uniform, that are engaging in military acts on the African continent with the sole purpose of controlling African land and resources and stealing it from indigenous people in Africa. It's just, that's why we did the show a couple of months back about why Africans shouldn't join the U.S. military. That is why we go hard as hell to say, you are not an American citizen. You are an African. You have never been a rightful citizen of this place. To get the same rights as any other citizen in the U.S. empire, African people have had to fight, bleed, and die. Have had to sacrifice and suffer to get the what we have now. And even to this day, we're still being killed in the street. We're still drastically unemployed. We're still being the most impacted by this pandemic. We're still facing insecure housing in underdeveloped communities, like even after all that struggling and suffering. And so if you look at those basic facts, it's very clear that we are not American citizens in the same way that other people are. Nope. Clearly.
We do not have an ounce of the same rights. We have the same right to die on behalf of the United States. Why the fuck would I want that? What? What? No. And if you cannot expect some sort of solidarity based on being an African person if you are going over there with the intent to still kill and harm. Like, no one owes you solidarity. No one owes you that if you are not going to support. Sorry.
What we have a responsibility to do is not only to refuse to engage in those projects, to not support the U.S. military, to not enlist in the U.S. military, to, if we are in the military right now and deployed to Africa, to resist that. We have that responsibility, but we also have the responsibility to make it clear what the U.S. military is doing in Africa, what the U.S. empire is doing in Africa, and resist it. To make the international connections between the Black Lives Matter movement and the movement for Black Lives and what African people are experiencing from police here to what African people are experiencing from the military in Africa. We must begin to make these international connections between the struggle for African liberation and each of these particular contexts. Because the very same people that are giving the police the funding and the training and the weaponry and the carte blanche, the right to criminalize us and dehumanize us and kill us. The very same people doing that here, the same forces doing that here, are doing precisely the same thing to Africans in Africa. If we accept the way that we've been taught, that these are separate, disconnected issues, it allows the U.S. empire the free reign to make our people suffer all over the world. Not just in Africa, but throughout the Western Hemisphere, throughout the Middle East, throughout Asia. We have to make these international connections. We have to understand that we have more connection to African people in Africa and African people in the Caribbean and African people in Central and South America than we do to the U.S. empire. We have more connection in terms of culture, more connection in terms of history, more connection in terms of shared destiny, more connection in terms of conditions with any African anywhere in the world than we do with any single part of the U.S. empire.
Yep. And if Black Lives Matter is a real thing, then Black lives have to matter everywhere. Everywhere. There's not a place where it's well, maybe not those African Black lives, maybe not those ones, all of us, everywhere, all the time.
And so that's really our fundamental responsibility. And it's not even a difficult thing to do, right? Because for the majority of our history in the United States, the majority of the history of the African liberation struggle in this context, we have been internationalists and anti-imperialists. We have intentionally worked to make the international connections that Dimitri and I are talking about. Like, the Black Panther Party is probably the most famous militant African organization that has ever existed. And the Black Panther Party was internationalist. The Black Panther Party was in Cuba. They were in Africa. They were in Asia. They were building connections with other colonized people's struggles against capitalism and imperialism, because they understood clearly that is the same fight on many different fronts. It is the same enemy attacking us all around the world, in the Congo, in Haiti, in Honduras, in Chicago, in Baltimore, and Albuquerque. It's the same enemy. The Black Panther Party understood that clearly, and they shared their understanding with all of the people that followed them. All the folks in the hood, all of the poor working class African people, all of the sisters that made up the majority of the organization, truth be told, they all had the same analysis of this international enemy that was attacking African people for the same reasons all around the world. It's really pretty new for our struggle to not be making these connections. It's really new for us to have a very singularly focused US-centric analysis of what is happening to us as African people. Because for the majority of our history, fighting back against this system, we were able to make these connections. It was really only Barack Obama that precipitated this shift away from an anti-imperialist analysis, away from like an internationalist analysis, towards like a US-centric analysis. Like, before Barack Obama, we understood that our destiny was not tied to this empire. We understood that we were citizens by force and existing outside of it and existing in opposition to it. After Barack Obama, all of a sudden we're like, we can be president too. This is our country.
No, it's not.
So it's just, I feel like I want to do a show on Barack Obama because I have a lot of things to get off my chest. But I really feel like he was instrumental in turning African people away from an internationalist and anti-imperialist politics, turning us away from an understanding of our struggle as like a Pan-African struggle. Like, he made us believe that we could actually be U.S. citizens and be respected in this particular context. And he wasn't like, you know, there were like signs that led up to him, like Colin Powell. Remember Colin Powell? We fucking love Colin Powell. He like straight up lied, like under oath, in front of the United Nations to justify the war in Iraq. He lied.
Yeah.
And ruined his career for the rest of his life. But before that, he was like, you know, he served in the Clinton administration. He was like a widely respected African man who has very high ranking in the U.S. military. And so that was another point where we were like, oh, we can be part of this system, even though this system exists to oppress us.
Exactly. An Obama show with, there's going to be so much smoke. But sometimes you have to learn shit you don't want to learn. Yeah. Sometimes you have to do it. And y'all's forever president, he wasn't that great, y'all. He wasn't.
No.
He just wasn't.
And even if you don't, we will make you care about Africa. If you watch the show enough, you will care about it. But even if you don't care about it right now, understand that the same fuckery that Barack Obama pulled in Africa, like, he went to Africa and was like, y'all need to stop blaming colonization for your problems. Even like, he was like giving the speech, and then the U.S. military was like deploying to Africa and building bases. He was like, stop blaming colonialism for your problems, as the United States was colonizing Africa. Like, my God, that's fucked up. But also, in the United States, he used to go to like black churches and be like, y'all need to stop feeding your kids fried chicken, and African dads have to raise their kids. Just like speaking in like pure stereotypes. Stereotypes. Where if a European had said that shit, we would have been like, excuse me? But because it was Barack Obama, we were like, oh, he has a point. So he would like go in African churches and say that kind of thing, while at the same time overseeing a drastic collapse in African wealth thanks to the subprime mortgage crisis, in which banks deliberately targeted African people seeking to buy homes and gave them loans they knew they could not afford, and then sat back and waited until they couldn't make the payments and then foreclosed on the houses. So African people lost a massive amount of generational wealth thanks to that crisis, and Barack Obama declined to prosecute the banks responsible and oversaw an economic recovery that focused on bailing out those banks while ignoring the many thousands of African families that have been devastated by being targeted, intentionally targeted in that way. In addition to that, he, of course, through the 1033 program, drastically expanded the transfer of surplus military equipment from the U.S. military to police forces in the United States. The 1033 program is responsible for giving billions with a B, dollars worth of military equipment, like armored personnel carriers, like those things that look like tanks that a lot of police forces have now, like military rifles, like bomb-sniffing robots. The police in Portland have one, and the police in Texas have one. So all of this military equipment that was made for combat in places like Africa, in places like Afghanistan, in places like Iraq, was given for free. They just had to ask for it to police agencies throughout the United States under the Obama administration. So he oversaw this massive transfer, or this massive theft of African generational wealth through the subprime mortgage crisis. He also arms police who are murdering African people in the street with military weapons. He was someone who was antagonistic to social justice movements that rose up in response to these conditions. Like, I was in Black Lives Matter when Barack Obama was president, and I remember youth in Ferguson and in Baltimore going to jail for life on federal charges because they got caught up in an uprising. I remember that shit. I remember the surveillance. I remember him deploying federal troops to Standing Rock to brutalize indigenous people. I remember the nationally coordinated campaign to destroy the Occupy movement. So at the same time as this man was in Africa talking about don't blame colonization while overseeing the colonization of Africa, he was also here blaming African people for our conditions while arming the forces oppressing us and overseeing a massive loss of our wealth. So, yeah, we could do a whole show. I'm just going to end with I hate that guy. I hate Barack Obama.
Yeah, it really broke my heart because I was like, wow, you really ain't shit. I was so hopeful and I was so excited. And then when you become disenfranchised and you're like, oh, so you want to talk about the fathers not being there for their children, but you are actively assisting with them going to prison forever over fuck shit. Got it. Great. Wonderful. You are actively participating in enabling black men to be murdered in the streets by militarized police forces, but you're okay with that. Okay, got it. Actively, my black wife is fantastic, but you bitches. When that realization hits, it's really painful. So yeah, fuck that guy for real. And it hurts to say it. I can admit it hurts. It hurts my heart to say it. But fuck him, because what was the meme? The hood under Clinton, the hood under Bush, the hood under Obama. It's all the same. What did he bring to the table? What did we win? What did Africans in America win when he was president for 8 years in a row? He did his 2 terms. What did we gain? What did we win? Nothing.
Someone should do that same meme for Africa, and it should just be like a bomb, after a drone bombing, and then you could do the same thing: Bush, Clinton, Obama, Trump, because they were all united when it came to expanding the U.S. military footprint in Africa. Trump is still drone bombing Africa as we speak, thanks to the infrastructure that was created by the Obama administration.
Because all he has to do is keep doing the same thing.
Precisely. And if you notice, the resistance, people like Nancy Pelosi, people like Bernie Sanders, people like AOC. Man, I would do a show on AOC, but I don't think she matters that much. But
Not yet.
but those people who are supposed to be like the opposition to Trump, that are supposed to be like progressive forces in the U.S. government, have nothing whatsoever to say about AFRICOM. Nothing, not a peep out of them about AFRICOM. And you know they're voting on these bills. You know they're authorizing the funding. You know that they are okay with the president having the power to do this, but they have nothing to say about it. Nothing whatsoever. That's also why. Sorry, go ahead.
No, so they get in bed over here. Why would they care?
It's just very funny to me. And then like the presidential debates are happening now. The vice presidential debate and the U.S. presidential debate. And whenever foreign policy comes up, it's always like a conversation, like a competition between who is going to bomb the most places. Like they're just like, you're weak on terrorism. I'm strong. And that, well, all that really means is I am willing to kill people overseas in the name of the U.S. empire. And like that's the whole conversation. It's really just a conversation about who's going to be harder on Africa, who's going to be harder on Iran, who's going to be harder on North Korea. It's never really a conversation about peace. It's never really a conversation about withdrawing the U.S. military from these places. It's never a conversation about cutting the massive Department of Defense budget. They're all on the same page when it comes to the most violent things the U.S. empire does around the world. Yep. They are all on the same page, regardless of political affiliation. When it comes to AFRICOM, they are all on the same page. There's no candidate on the ballot who has a chance of winning, who is against the U.S. military moving in the ways that we have discussed in Africa. It's not on the ballot. In fact, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris were both in power when AFRICOM became, Joe Biden was in power when AFRICOM became what it is today. Mm-hmm. He oversaw that shit as vice president. Yep. And nowhere in any of his campaign promises in the 2020 election does he even address or put on the table stopping that shit. Same man also wants to give $300 million to the police in the United States. And so we again see this repeating pattern of the same people who are arming and funding and training the police that are brutalizing our people in the United States are also responsible for arming, funding, and training and authorizing the troops that are brutalizing our people in Africa. Same people. Yep. It's the same people.
I'm going to kill more people. No, I'm going to kill more people. When you hear people talk about terrorism, try and frame it that way. Who's going to kill the most people?
Yes.
Because that's really what they care about. That's what they care about.
For real. And the whole concept, we should do a show on terrorism too. Because, the whole concept of terrorism, I feel like they talk about it, like they start from like the middle of the story where like someone attacked the United States and they're like, we must retaliate. But they never really talk about like how did that person, why did they want to do that? How did they get the train to do that? Why are there so many people angry at the United States? Like they don't really ever talk about like how it is that we got to the point where there was a terrorist act committed against the U.S. empire. Like why is there so much anger at the United States around the world? I know what it's not. It's not because they hate us for our freedom. That doesn't even make any fucking sense. That's what the people say. That's what people say. You don't remember
where?
That's what Bush said. Remember Freedom Prize?
Free where? Free the fuck where? Where? Where is it?
Good point.
Where is it?
Good point.
America likes to throw the rock and hide his hands. And that's how America always ends up in bullshit. They want to throw a rock and then try and hide their hands and then cry when they get hit back. I really feel like there's no simpler way to explain it. You cannot fuck with people and expect those people not to retaliate eventually. And then when they do retaliate, then you're up in arms and in your feelings. Okay.
So the last thing I want to say about AFRICOM is that there are currently discussions happening about moving the headquarters of AFRICOM. As I stated earlier, right now it is in Germany. Trump has damaged a lot of relationships that the U.S. empire previously had around the world. And so now Germany's like, you probably have to get the fuck up out of here. And so now they're talking about, I know it is actually really funny.
Sorry.
So now Germany's like, you gotta go. And so now they're talking about, where to move it to, possible locations for the new headquarters of AFRICOM. And the options on the table are within Africa itself. And that's like on the low on the list, because the U.S. military understands very clearly that if they put the headquarters of AFRICOM in Africa, that African people will burn that shit down. Like, it's not even a question. It's just like a matter of when. Like, they will we will not accept the headquarters of a U.S. military's Africa command in Africa. That shit will get burnt to the ground, and I will throw a party. So yeah, that's like on the list. The other option on the list is in the United States, in South Carolina. Yeah. Like, there's a huge African population in South Carolina.
Put it there. Do that.
That's like, so Black Alliance for Peace is where I heard about that, right? And Black Alliance for Peace in their newsletter was like, that would be a remarkable act of hubris on the part of the U.S. government to put the headquarters of the U.S. military's project in Africa in a majority African state in the United States. Like, woo! And the way that U.S. military bases work is that they always put them in the hood. Like, in Kirkland is in the International District here in Tiwa Territory. It's like completely surrounded by African, indigenous, Chicano families, like poor working class families. Yep. So it's very likely that it would be a similar situation should the headquarters be moved to South Carolina. But that's, you know, there's like no guarantee that our people would resist it, you know? Because Barack Obama caught us slipping. Kamala Harris, Colin Powell, Condoleezza Rice. Like, there's been like a concentrated effort to strip the anti-imperialist analysis from African politics and also to move our people rightward. And to a certain extent, it's been successful. And so my concern is they move it to South Carolina and our people are just like, let me try to get a job. Like, they're not fighting it back. They're just like, yeah, trying to get their little piece.
So they moved it to a majority African, very poor state.
They haven't yet, but they're talking about it.
While I'm like, do it.
Oh, man.
We discussed on multiple occasions, African people, especially young African people, join the military as the way to get out. Like, listen, I would like a stable paycheck. I would like healthcare. Healthcare would be fantastic. Can I have some healthcare, please? So I can see the other side of the coin. But still, you want to move it? Go on, put it in South Carolina. Go on here. Go ahead. Put it down there. Let's see how it goes. Let's see what happens. I don't know.
But we, you know, African revolutionary organizations, Pan-Africanist organizations, radical African organizations, social justice African organizations, like, we have a responsibility to, like, hammer hard these international connections between our struggle, to make it clear what AFRICOM is in the minds of our people, to make it clear that the U.S. military has no business in Africa, that the U.S. government, that U.S. corporations have no business in Africa, to make the connections between what's happening to our people in Africa and in the United States, so that if that happens, if the U.S. government is stupid enough to move the headquarters of AFRICOM to a place within the United States, that our people are conscious of what that means and are organized to be able to resist that. Because we have, like, there's absolutely no chance whatsoever that me as a person living in the United States can have any impact whatsoever on, say, like, Chinese foreign policy to Africa. It's just not going to happen. It's not going to happen. Where I can have a massive impact as a African person living in the United States is in U.S. foreign policy towards Africa. We did it before with the struggle against apartheid in Tanzania. We organized massive boycotts and solidarity demonstrations that pressured the U.S. government to stop doing business with the apartheid government of Tanzania. So if we can do that in that particular case, then there's no question that with enough consciousness and organization, we can do it for AFRICOM as well. But right now, the issue is that our people are not conscious of what AFRICOM is or that it even exists. Mm-hmm. And so that's why we do this show.
Yep. Tear down that barrier of an us and them. It's just us. It's just us. That's it.
For sure. So that was the PE section. Let me see what comments. Monika's in there putting in work.
Oh, is she? Hey, Monica. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good afternoon now.
Good morning, Bird. It's morning for 4 more minutes. Hi, Bird. So Kimberly Wadi said Cop Mala. That's my favorite nickname. Cop Mala Harris. So we were talking about Kamala earlier.
Do that. That's nice.
Bird said she learned about AFRICOM because of us. Monica says Kamala Harris and Cory Booker are silent and they're getting credit on BLM legislation. I don't know what legislation you're referring to, but that is very sad. Reminds me of the war on poverty, war on drugs. It's the same thing. War on terrorism. Precisely. Terrorism is like an idea. Terrorism is like, by its nature, by the nature of like the people who are engaging in it against like the enemy of the U.S. empire. Like, it's not something that you can like go to war with. Like, it's like too nebulous and too small and too decentralized. So all it's ever going to end up doing is like destroying like place after place after place as they try to like play whack-a-mole with this force that will not be destroyed with military weapons. The reason why people are engaging in acts of like so-called terrorism against the U.S. empire is precisely because of what Demetria said. You cannot fuck with people continuously all around the world and expect that they're not going to put up a resistance or they're not going to fight back, they're not going to respond. Like, when those U.S. military soldiers were killed in Niger, the U.S. media said it was, like, militants, said it was, like, terrorists. And I'm like, you are an occupying force. You are an invading army on their land. How are they the terrorists in that particular situation? How are they, like, the people acting unreasonably? They're supposed to just accept it when you come into their land with guns and tanks? They're just deal with it? That's wild. That's wild to me. So, yeah. The idea that, like, a war can be waged with any kind of success against terrorism, against, like, that concept, is as ludicrous as a war on poverty or a war on drugs. And we saw how that shit worked out. We saw how those things worked out.
Mm-hmm.
And the war on terrorism is heading in the very same direction. And then Monica says, look what's horrifically happening in the border. There will be consequences. People have memories. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
I feel like, yeah, the people that are locked up in immigration detention centers in the United States have, like, people outside of the centers. Have, like, families that they left behind.
Yep.
I feel like we think about them like charity cases or, like, people who are just, like, isolated from communities, but no.
Eventually, somebody's coming back for them.
Yeah. I just think the United States acts in a way that doesn't really have any foresight. And, like, it's, like, both parties, no matter who's in power, they just act in a way that's very, very destructive on a global scale, and they don't really think about the consequences.
And, like, when you're thinking about the party system, you are voting for the head or the ass of the same exact animal. If you get one, you're absolutely getting the other. It's not like it's a gazelle and a lemur. You're getting the head or the ass of the same animal. So maybe stop putting so much faith in that.
Put your faith in your people. All right. So that was the political education section of the show. It was actually like an hour. So let's keep it moving.
Hey, y'all. Yeah, let's move.
Next up, we want to talk about what's happening with this pandemic and what's happening here, specifically in New Mexico. First off, Trump got COVID. We are living... What did you say?
Sorry.
Right now, there is like a straight up outbreak of COVID-19 in the White House. They're like dropping like flies, ironically, because I heard a fly landed on Mike Pence's head yesterday. Like, for like 2 minutes. Damn. But, so Trump got COVID. Stephen Miller got COVID. Stephen Miller is better known as like the architect of the Trump administration's immigration policies. He's like a straight up white nationalist. Like, it was like revealed. There was like a leak of his emails where it was like explicit that he was a white nationalist. It was like months ago, and like nothing happened. He's just like still there because he wasn't elected. He was appointed. But yeah. So Trump got COVID-19. Many of the people in the White House got COVID-19. Really, really important to emphasize that the White House is basically like a small city. It requires like a lot of poor and working class exploited labor to function on a day-to-day basis. So that means even though we know of like, you know, something like 30 high-ranking Trump administration officials that have gotten COVID-19, there's no question that the people, the poor, working class, colonized people that are forced to be in proximity to these folks have also contracted COVID-19. But we are not going to hear about it. We are not going to hear about it because according to U.S. mainstream rules of engagement, of analysis, poor people do not matter. Poor colonized people don't fucking matter. We focus on the folks with power, and everybody else can go fuck themselves. So Trump, of course, has COVID, and he is getting access to the best treatment available. One thing that I want to point out is that we had all of these wild ass discussions about treatments that he touted that had no medical backing whatsoever, like hydroxychloroquine, like fucking injecting bleach, like all kinds of things that he pushed as possible treatments for COVID-19, but they haven't done a single one of those things on him. He is not taking hydroxychloroquine. He is absolutely not getting injected with bleach. He's getting state-of-the-art, cutting-edge medical treatments, the best possible medical treatment, and he is getting this after spending months, like for the entire pandemic, downplaying this shit and pushing quack treatments.
Yep.
Quack treatments. It's very, very, very wild to me that this man was like, hydroxychloroquine cures COVID-19. He got that African lady doctor who like thought fibroids came from demons. Sex with demons. He got her to say it, and people were like, she's right though. So like people were like listening to him, and then when he gets it, he's like, no thank you. He's like,
you didn't want no Lysol injections. I don't understand why. It works, right?
Like, why? You telling people to do that shit and they listen to you. Like, some people took hydroxychloroquine and fucking poisoned themselves.
Yep.
But you can't take it? I thought it worked, though. So
it's a thing, right?
All right.
And he's getting that on taxpayer dollars.
Yeah. U.S. government at work. Other things in the news is that, like I just mentioned, that there's like 30 documented cases of COVID-19 in the White House, but the White House requires a small city of exploited labor to keep functioning, which means that there are many, many invisible, poor, and working class people who are contracting this virus to keep that shit going. So the very same thing that's happening in the White House on like a micro level is happening throughout the United States on a macro level. Mm-hmm. We recently got the news that almost 20,000 employees of Amazon.com have contracted COVID-19 while working the past few months. At the same time, the same week, we got news that Trump had unilaterally decided to cut off negotiations for the second stimulus check. Thus far, U.S. citizens have gotten one-time payment of up to $1,200, where most people didn't even get $1,200, and many, many more were just like randomly disqualified from getting anything. So that is the only kind of relief that has come from people from the U.S. government. Discussions around a second stimulus have never gotten off the ground. While they are able to unite when it comes to drone bombing Africa, when it comes to expanding the Defense Department budget, when it comes to bailing out businesses that are suffering during the pandemic, there's like bipartisan consensus to get that shit done. But when it comes to millions of poor and working class, mostly colonized people who are suffering during this pandemic, there has been no consensus. They have not been able to reach any kind of agreement around this second stimulus check for months. Like, what was the first one? It was like in April.
They said in March, and then people ended up getting that money in April. But we told y'all the stimulus was some bullshit. Just like we told you the eviction moratorium was some bullshit. We told y'all straight out the gate. And here we are with some bullshit.
Yeah. So they tried and failed to negotiate that second stimulus check for the entire summer. And in the meantime, they were funding all kinds of U.S. imperialist fuck shit around the world. Mm-hmm. And then Trump, when he got sick, got a wild hair up his ass and decided to cut off the negotiations entirely. But then I read a headline yesterday where he was like, actually, never mind. Let's do it. He's like going back and forth, and my comrade said it's the drugs, and I kind of believe it.
Yeah, the flip-flop was real until after I win the election. Bitch, what? After I win the election, we can talk about a stimulus. You know, at that point, people are already dying. They're dying from COVID. They're dying from hunger. They're dying from exposure because they're fucking homeless.
Yep.
But you want to wait, you dumb bitch. And then he said, well, Pelosi, get a bill on my desk right now for $1,200. I'll sign it. Fuck you, sir.
And then Bird also pointed out, so there was like in the original stimulus bill, there was a temporary extension of unemployment benefits that gave folks an additional $600 per week on top of what they were already receiving. And so that, to my understanding, has expired. And so Bird saying in the comments, going from $600 to $200 in unemployment has been rough. Yeah, and for a lot of people, that's their sole source of income. And on top of that, even after that extra $600 a week was approved, many U.S. states did not have the technological infrastructure to actually give people those payments. Like I was reading about in Chicago, there's like a massive backlog of unemployment insurance cases because their system literally cannot handle processing the additional cases. And so people are just like chilling with suffering with no money.
Yep.
No money. There was a comrade in New Mexico chapter that applied for unemployment like back in April who qualified for the extension and could not get through to anybody until like last month. And so just to have had no income. And there's so many people in that situation.
Yep.
There is yeah. Sorry, I keep cutting you off.
No, I just interject sometimes because what the fuck? Sorry.
Yes. So yeah, there's a lot of people being abandoned right now by both parties in power who are, like I said, able to reach a consensus when it comes to imperialism, when it comes to looting and stealing and invading other places, but are not able to reach a consensus when it comes to keeping people afloat on like a basic level during a global pandemic of a deadly virus. The other folks, in addition to essential workers, in addition to colonized, poor, working class people that are being abandoned, are of course like prisoners and undocumented people who are, as we speak, locked up in immigration detention facilities and federal and state prison facilities without access to testing or healthcare or even basic hygiene capacity or capacity to social distance. So here in New Mexico, I talked about this on the last show, the governor of New Mexico, Michelle Lujan Grisham, gets like a lot of credit, right, for flattening the curve, or whatever the fuck they call that shit, for making sure that cases in New Mexico did not spike as they did in other places. Except the numbers in New Mexico have never actually reflected how many people have this virus here. And I say that because within detention centers and prisons in the state of New Mexico, in the blue state of New Mexico, she is a Democrat, they are not testing the people locked up. They're not testing people. In July, there was a riot. It was an uprising in a detention center because the folks incarcerated were like, we are getting sick and you're not doing anything.
Right.
No one's being tested. We don't have soap. We can't social distance. There is a global pandemic. They had to have a riot. And then the state of New Mexico was like, all right, we're going to test 10% of y'all. We're going to test 10% of the prison population. I think it was like 15 or 20% of the prison employees. And that is our response to this riot. The people had to burn shit down to get 10% testing. Mm-hmm. So if there's like 100 people in a room, right? And you test 10 of them, how many left have not been tested that could possibly have this fucking virus?
Yep.
There's 100 people in the room, and you test 10 of them, and then you say to the other 90, good luck.
Yep.
Here's a bar of soap a month.
And they have to fucking riot for fucking soap. If the core of not catching COVID is staying clean, is washing your hands, is social distancing, no one should have to fucking riot for a bar of goddamn soap. Make it make sense. Make it make sense. You can't.
And that, once again, is a blue state. As a Democratic governor, Michelle Lujan Grisham, she was invited to speak at the Democratic National Convention because she was supposedly handling COVID so well, but prisoners and undocumented people who are locked up do not have access to tests. Additionally, asymptomatic people who may have COVID-19 but do not have symptoms, it's very difficult to get a test here. And on top of that, even if you do have symptoms, if you don't have health insurance, it's like several $100s to get a test here. So all that's happening, and also at the same time, despite all that covering up and shit, New Mexico is experiencing a COVID-19 spike. So what's happening, Demetria?
Hi. Yeah, that curve flattening, whatever nonsense. Yes, no. So that's not a thing anymore, okay? It was a thing. We got down to double digits, but we also believe that's due to test suppression because there weren't enough supplies. But we're not going to talk about that. Yesterday, October the 7th, there were 426 new cases of COVID in New Mexico. 120 of those cases were in Bernalillo County. 35 cases in Chaves County. Hold on, because I got to scroll down. Oh, One in Colfax. Oh, so many. One, if we're going to go backwards, one new case in the New Mexico Corrections Department within the people behind the walls in Lee County. So there is a person in Lee County Correctional who has COVID now. When you read the numbers at the very bottom, shocker, are people who are in prisons. You get their numbers, and the numbers have been shit for like 2 weeks, and that's due to people being tired of quarantine. Quarantine sucks. This is absolute garbage, but we're in a global pandemic. There's not a place on the globe you can go to that isn't affected by COVID. We're in a global pandemic. So yes, quarantine sucks. And no, I love going out to eat. It's the best thing ever, but it's fucking dangerous. Restaurants are opening. People are saying, fuck this whole mask situation. Your kids, if you have high school age children, they get to play volleyball starting next week. Where does volleyball happen? It happens inside. It happens at APS schools. A lot of our schools are really old. A lot of our schools haven't had any renovations done. So that means the ventilation system is shit in their schools. But you're going to let them sweat and run and play in the gym. Okay, that's brilliant. Don't do that. So yes, that is our lovely COVID spike, and it's not, it's just getting worse. 316 on the 6th, 158 on the 5th. No good. 298 on the 3rd, 341 on the 2nd. Terrible things. Things aren't going well. Wash your hands, wear your mask, stay at home if you possibly can. Don't let your kids play sports. It's just, sports are great. They're fantastic. Now ain't the time. The reopening plan for APS, if you have a child who has an IEP and is in IGS 1 or 2 program, your child can go to school for a few hours a day. I believe it's 4 days a week. There is PPE for your student and for their teachers, but also keep your kid at home. BCSO, I'm going to try and be brief because I will swear more. Bernalillo County Sheriff's Department is going to check on kids who are truant. You are sending the police to check on truant children. Now, truancy checks used to be done with an APD officer and a counselor or social worker, especially with Title I schools or at-risk schools. They had a dedicated APD officer on their campus. BCSO was often used for outliers, out of city, but in county type addresses. But make this make sense. You are going to send the police to the home of students. Do those students have electricity? If they don't have electricity, what the fuck are the sheriffs going to do about that? If they don't have internet, what are the sheriffs going to do about that? What are they going to do? What are they going to do? Not a goddamn thing. But you know what we are going to hear about very soon? All of the people they picked up on warrants when the sheriffs are going to do these truancy checks. I don't have good words for how awful and how stupid this is. Make sure people can pay their light bill, can pay their internet bill. Why don't you do that? Or why don't you say, hey, guess what? We know people are economically fucked right now. We're not going to cut your shit off. Do that thing. Give that a walk around the park before you start sending the fucking police to people's doors. I don't have good words for that. Don't answer your door. Try that. Just don't answer your fucking door. Just don't answer the goddamn door. If a counselor or a teacher is concerned about your kid not showing up to class, let them contact you. Email me, text me, assuming my shit works. Email me, text me, try and call me. Don't send the fucking police to my door. Okay, so guess what? We have upcoming events. We gotta move. I'm just getting mad. We have upcoming events. We have the Pan-African Film Series. It happens the second Saturday of every month. It has happened consistently for how long now? We've been doing this, what?
Almost 2 years.
Almost 2 years?
Almost 2 years with not skipping. That's awesome.
Yay! So, Pan-African Film Series is still a thing. It is the second Saturday of every single month. Guess what Saturday is? It's Meteor Man. We're going to show Meteor Man on Saturday, right here on Facebook. Robert Townsend did amazing movies, and he doesn't get nearly the flowers he deserves. Because before y'all had Tyler Perry being Madea, you had Robert Townsend really putting in work and creating amazing films. So we're doing Meteor Man, 2 o'clock, right here on Facebook Live. Yay! Join us. It's going to be awesome. Indigenous Peoples Day. What is it? The PAA and Red Nation are doing events for Indigenous People Days on Monday, Indigenous Peoples Day, Monday the 12th. So you need to link up with our comrades in the Pueblo Action Alliance and with the Red Nation for those events on Monday.
I'm looking it up right now because they have an ask.
I love that.
Sweet. Okay, so yeah, Monday, October 12th, the Pueblo Action Alliance, Seeding Sovereignty, and the Red Nation will be distributing 600 backpacks to unsheltered relatives in Tiwa Territory and beyond. Tiwa Territory is, of course, the rightful name of Albuquerque, New Mexico. And so they are calling for donations of items, new items, in order to help them pull off this project. They're asking for donations of beanies, of thermals, of gloves, of scarves, of backpacks. And you can bring those donations actually today on Thursdays. This is like the last Thursday you have a chance to do it. You can bring them to PAA and Seeding Sovereignty at 211 10th Street Southwest in Albuquerque. That is the swap office. Or tomorrow, you can bring it to the Red Nation office from 12 to 4 p.m. at 1421 Central Avenue Northeast. Once again, they are seeking donations of new items, including beanies, thermals, gloves, scarves, and backpacks. And you can bring your donation today to the swap office at 211 10th Ave Street Southwest, or tomorrow to the Red Nation office from 12 to 4 p.m. at 1421 Central Avenue Northeast. And this is like a really exciting coalition and a really exciting action for Indigenous People Day. They have like a bunch of demands, including the abolition of the police state, including defunding and abolishing internal customs enforcement, that's ICE, and Child Protective Services. Like, Child Protective Services did not get the smoke it deserves. Because Child Protective Services is responsible for separating so many African and Indigenous children from their families and putting them into foster care where they are abused. It happened to many people in my family. It happened to many poor working class single parent households in African and Indigenous communities. So shout out to that demand. Other demands they have are free housing and access and resources provided for Indigenous communities during and after the COVID-19 pandemic for all people, particularly unsheltered and outhoused relatives. And lastly, they demand respect for all people and a call to modern day genocide, because settler colonialism's goal has always been the removal of Indigenous people from this land. We have to understand that settler colonialism was not an event. Settler colonialism is an ongoing process, and settler colonialism requires the genocide, like the killing off, the complete killing off of the rightful owners of this land. So the U.S. military or the U.S. empire's project of settler colonialism on this territory will not be finished until every single Indigenous person is murdered. That is why we have to understand this empire and this process of settler colonialism as ongoing acts of violence against not just Indigenous people, but also against African people, also against the continent of Africa, also against colonized peoples all around the world. That is why we say we are Africans, not Americans, because we are not signing up to be part of that particular act of violence. Fuck that. We unite with the Indigenous people of this land, and we unite with their call to get their land back, and we hope that our comrades will support this incredible campaign for Indigenous Peoples Day on Monday, October 12th.
Yes. So that's all the events. Yeah, and if you please, if you can, and if you don't have items, like you don't have time to go shopping, if you can, share a few dollars, Like it's important.
Come up
So
off that cash money.
support our comrades of the PAA and the Red Nation, please, and thank you.
And also, so we've talked a lot about all the ways that this system is failing our people, but with programs like what's happening on Indigenous Peoples Day, like programs with the Solidarity Feeds that Red Nation does, with programs like the elder care program we do and the rental support that we just started, social justice organizations, revolutionary organizations are filling in the gap left by the negligence of this government. We do not have to accept the violence from the U.S. empire. We do not have to vote for any option that is going to lead to more violence against Africa and African people. We have the option of building our own independent political power. We have the option of building our own structures and institutions and political formations that are centered around our liberation, that are centered around life, that are centered around justice. This lesser evil shit is like for the birds. It's for the birds. It's like a failed strategy on every possible level. It just leads to more and more compromise with evil while people die anyway. And so what our comrades at PA are doing, what our comrades at the Red Nation are doing, what we are doing in our community every single week as the APRP around the world, like that is the world that we are trying to build. We are trying to build something much better than this system built on death, the system built on exploitation, the system built on theft. We do not accept that this is the best that we can do. Because if we can like pay people's rent, if we can feed elders every single week, and we have no money, we have no grant funding, we got nothing. This is like coming from our organizing efforts to raise money and like raise resources for our community. So if we could do that, even though there's only 10 of us, even though there's only like so many people in the Red Nation and Public Action Alliance, if we can fill these gaps, imagine what we could accomplish if every single person was active in a revolutionary organization fighting for justice and building something better.
Yep.
We know it's possible. We just need more people on our team doing this work and refusing to compromise with this system built on violence and death. That's it. So we always want to end the show with the call to join an organization.
Yes.
If you are hearing us speak and you are not in an organization fighting for justice, we need you to get off the sidelines and get in the fight. If you're African, join the All African People's Revolutionary Party. Hit us up in a direct message or an email to aprpnewmexico@gmail.com, and we will set you up with an orientation. If you are Indigenous, check out Pueblo Action Alliance and the Red Nation and Seeding Sovereignty. If you are European, or I apologize, that's rough for you, but there's many organizations that you could join. There's many organizations that you could join that are doing great work, that are doing incredible work, that support us. We just had John Brown Breakfast Club on the show. We had, there's Black Rose that we work with a lot. There's DSA, if you want to do that. There's many organizations that are doing great work, fighting for social justice and fighting for the world that we want to see. The point is that you need to get into one of those organizations, get on the winning team, help us build something better. Stop going for that lesser evil shit. Stop voting for people who are going to bomb Africa in your name. Instead, build the alternative that you want to see in the world. Yeah. So, with that, this has been Weekly Pan-African News Live. We do this show every single Thursday at 11 a.m. Mountain Time. We do a different topic every single week. We just wrapped up a series of interviews with social justice organizations here on Tiwa territory. Our next series, we haven't confirmed it, but I am proposing that our next series be a number of 101 type discussions on things like Pan-Africanism, socialism, and revolution. So if we all decide that that's what we're going to do, stay tuned for that next week. And as always, please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. It's the same handle. Wait. Right there. It's the same handle. I was like, where is my fucking hand? Okay. It's the same handle at APRP New Mexico on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Please follow us. Also, subscribe to our channel on YouTube. Every single time we do an event, we post the video on YouTube afterwards. So you can see all the past episodes of our show. You can see political education seminars that we've done before. You can see the Pan-African film series, the past editions, all on our YouTube channel. So subscribe and check out that content. Once again, my name is Onyesanu. This is my comrade Demetria. We are members of the All African People's Revolutionary Party New Mexico chapter and also the All African Women's Revolutionary Union. The All African People's Revolutionary Party is a revolutionary, pan-African, socialist, mass political party with the political objective of Pan-Africanism, which is one unified socialist Africa, because when Africa is free, when all that land and all that wealth and all those resources are collectively and democratically controlled by the masses of African people, then our people everywhere will be free. So thank you so much for tuning in. Stay ready for the revolution and have a great rest of your day.
Stay ready.